A sailor said to me, "You know where we're headed?" He said, "We're headed to Dieppe." It was pitch black, and we walked through the ship in silence, in the dark, holding onto the bayonet scabbard of the man ahead to the landing craft. The Germans fired flares, but it lit up the channel, you know, and you could see the escort vessels and all these little landing craft. These mortars were coming all up the beach, and the stones were multiplying the shrapnel. It was just showers of this stuff. The last one that landed, I tilted my helmet and turned my eyes away because I was worried about my eyes. And this sniper hit the brim of my helmet and knocked my helmet off. This signalman was signaling the destroyer. Fire a couple of shells in, hit the wall, knock a hole in the wall, do anything. Fire shells in. Never mind the men. If you kill us guys, that's fine. Nothing. I weighed 80 pounds when the American 9th Army liberated me on the 12th of April, 1945. I ran out, and here's the Jeep with these three American troops, driver, radio operator. And I spoke to the officer, I saluted. Other men were coming out, and the hood, men's tears were leaving little trails on the hood of the Jeep. I arrived in England on the 27th of April, and they hospitalized us. I called it Paradise, the one Canadian General Hospital. And after we'd been through, anything, a crust of bread on the street was worthwhile, was worthy. It was all the joyfulness of the war ending. I was in London the night before VE Day with my brother Alan. I couldn't rejoice. I couldn't rejoice. I wanted to see these people rejoicing.
Wow.
Thanks everybody so much for joining us. My name is Samantha. I'm the Outbound Operations Manager for the Battlefield Tours of Canada, and I'm so happy to be joined by all you wonderful people. I really am. Today's a really wonderful day, and thank you so much for joining us. It means so much to so many. In attendance for today's live stream, it won't just be David O'Keefe and Jane Poulton participating. A majority of other incredible people in our community are joining us today. We have universities, we have students, we have staff, staff both in Europe, staff here in Canada, staff from the Juno Beach Center is here with us today. Alex Fitzgerald back is here. Just a lot of wonderful people joining us, and most especially, of course, Jane Poulton, whose father was the gentleman speaking to us just there. Jane Poulton and the families of the Dieppe Raid are here with us as well, so of whom I especially like to thank for being here today. In the early hours of August 19th, 1942, 5,000 Canadians, 1,000 British, and 50 US Army Rangers stormed Dieppe's coastline, and they stormed along 6 beaches from east to west, codenamed Yellow Beach, Blue Beach, Red Beach, White Beach, Green Beach, and Orange Beach. In less than 10 hours since the Allied troops landed, a total of 3,367 of the 6,086 would either be killed, wounded, or captured. It's a near 60% loss of fighting strength. Of the high Canadian contingent of 5,000 men, over 900 were killed, and another 1,800 were taken prisoner for a casualty rate of 68%. These staggering numbers are incomparable to the mere 591 casualties that the German army suffered that day. Again, a couple of you are coming in to the chat. I will continue to let you in as we go. This is also being streamed to our Facebook and our YouTube. So if you have a comment that you want to share publicly, feel free to head over there. First of all, I would just like to thank you all again for being here. And I also want to kind of start off with what my experience working with Jane Poulton has been with for all this time. In 2015, a woman from Barrie, Ontario walks into our office in Toronto, and she sits down and tells me that she was the daughter of a man who was among the Canadians who stormed the beaches at Dieppe. On August 19th, 1942, he stormed the beach, and this woman from Barrie started talking about what happened to her dad. He survived, but he was forced to march over 50 miles without water before taking a journey by train in a cattle car crammed in with 50 other men for 1 week with a black piece of bread and one little gap of light. And she tells me that at night, while he lay in prison camp bound to shackles, he would get so thirsty that he would literally purse his lips against the dry dirt floor and suck as hard as he could to gain a bit of moisture. She told me about the 3 miserable and cold years that he spent at that German prisoner of war camp before he was forced to participate in the Death March. Over 80,000 POWs were forced to march westward across Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Germany in extreme winter conditions over about 4 months between January and April 1945, without shoes, without food, without mercy. Jack Poulton walked, and he survived, and he made it home. And this woman who was sitting there talking to me in the office told me about her childhood. And it was a childhood where fireworks weren't allowed, where you had these difficult moments sitting at dinner. And she talked about a man who would wake up in the middle of the night, and he suffered from this for the rest of his life. So she told me her plan. She decided she would travel across Canada searching for every single family who had a loved one who landed on the very same beach her father did. And she was convinced that these families needed to go back to that beach. And she said we could learn so much about the suffering if we could just get back to that beach and follow in their footsteps. And she was looking at travel companies across Canada to help her with this pilgrimage. And she left the meeting by giving me a book. And her and her father had written it together. And she told me that she knew I wouldn't read it, but she gave it to me anyways, because she said it would give me more of an understanding of what her father went through. Well, that book is called Destined to Survive. I'll put it up on the screen in just a moment. And on the very first page, it reads that her father had traveled to Watson, Saskatchewan, where he was working on a farm harvesting wheat. Now, I moved to Watson, Saskatchewan by fluke, just one of those odd little coincidences in life. Jane Poulton has pictures from his old diary about a native from a native guy from Kapuskasing, Ontario, moves out to Watson, and he was living in this tiny town in 1939 when war broke out. Needless to say, I had the incredible honor of working with Jane in 2017, 800 other families across Canada, retracing their father's footsteps. I had the honor of guiding with Glenn Edmonds. We guided 60 plus of these family members back to Dieppe, France for the 70th anniversary of Dieppe. We were able to show Don Cato and Debbie Cato is here as well. We were able to show them where Don's father had cut barbed wire, going against orders, saving lots of lives. It was an incredible experience for all of us. Absolutely. So it's kind of, today will be an emotional day. I have no doubt about that. But again, it's just so incredibly special to have all of you joining us. Thanks again so much. A couple of you I see in the chat, Pamela is just asking where you can get the book. It's very easy to find online. Destined to Survive is the name, and I'll put the link up very shortly, but let's get to it, shall we? Let's start by introducing Jane and David. Jane and David, did you want to say hello?
Hello.
Hello,
Thank you
everybody.
so much. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us along this morning on what really is a remarkable day in Canadian history and in Allied history. And of course, I'm just absolutely thrilled to be sharing the stage with Jane, who I'm a huge fan of.
Likewise, David.
I do want to say Jane and David have done a few Zooms. We've done a few things together just on our own. And there's so much that I was like, save it for the live stream. Because sometimes the conversations would just get so emotional. And both David and Jane have such an incredible passion, dedication. I mean, the amount of work that you guys have put into what you do is unbelievable. If you guys think I drink coffee, like, oh my goodness. So many, what a legacy you both have provided for all of us. The resources that you two single-handedly have provided all of us is without a doubt a greatest treasure. So thank you. It is an honor. And thank you for all you do for all of us, because it's been life-changing. It really has. So without any ado, I do have a few questions to get us started. First of all, I would love if we ask David and Jane if you guys can give us what your personal connection is to Dieppe. That would be great. I know we all know, but for those watching who might not know, I would love that. So Jane, do you want to get started? Tell us a little bit about what your journey is with the Every Man Remembered organization.
Absolutely. So my dad was one of the POWs who liked to talk. Maybe not earlier when he came back, but he, in my research and meeting with families, I'm constantly hearing from families, dad didn't even tell us he had been a POW, whereas my dad liked to talk. So I grew up with Dieppe every single day. He was trapped in his memories. So every school project I did, speeches at school, when I went to Ryerson for the radio and television arts, my assignment was to put a commercial together, and it was a PSA for veterans at Dieppe. Everything I did focused on that. When my brother and sister and I were young, we would be taken down to Queen Street in Toronto to the Cenotaph on August 19th. And we'd watch all of the Royal Regiment POWs and the men who made it back line up to parade. Eventually that stopped, and they put together a memorial right in Fort York Armory. But my whole life revolved around Dieppe. My dad, as Sam mentioned, there were the odd little flashbacks that he would have that I didn't realize until we wrote the book, that, when he got angry or he, something happened, it was a flashback he was experiencing. And sometimes we thought it was sort of humorous, because he would come out with some, like he'd say, "Was gibt's?" and we'd go, "What?" But it was everything was centered around Dieppe and him being a prisoner of war. So when we wrote the book, it took about 5 years. I had no idea it was this difficult for him to put this onto paper as I know now. If I had have known, I wish I could go back in time, because my kids would come in and interrupt. They were pretty young at the time. And he would get angry, and he would say, "Leave us alone, leave us alone." And they didn't understand it, because they were really close to my dad. And he would occasionally get mad at me because I would want to embellish little things. And he would say, "No, this has to be the truth. There's people alive that know this story. It has to be the truth." And so he'd get mad, he'd pick up his notes, and he'd go home. And it would be 2 weeks before he'd come back again to work on the book. So I didn't realize how difficult this was for him. But once the book was published, it was like he purged onto the paper. He became a different man. This man who had a grade 8 education because he was the eldest son on a farm and his father was injured, and always thought he wasn't very smart. He was actually one of the smartest men I ever knew. But he was speaking to bank managers at the Royal York Hotel about his book. And I would go with him to schools and community groups, and he would tell the story, and always with emotion. And that emotion stuck with me. So right before he passed away, he knew he didn't have long. And he asked me to take him to the woman who mounted his medals. And I said, why? And he said, well, when I die, they're going to your brother and they're not correct. And I said, what do you mean they're not correct? He said, the Dieppe veterans were never given the honor of wearing the France and Germany star. And I've been wearing it in defiance all these years, and it has to come off because they're not correct. And I kind of lost my mind. I said, Dad and I had a really good, close relationship. So I said, you keep that damn medal on there. You deserve that medal. You were in a prison camp doing sabotage and trying to escape. And he said, no, it was struck for D-Day, and we've petitioned for 50 years, and they gave us a Dieppe bar. And so a lot of this sort of information always was in my mind. Dad passed away August 3rd, 2005, the year of the veteran. And right before he died, we had a conversation. He was growing weaker. We had a conversation, and he said, we were sacrificed. And as time goes on, we're going to be forgotten about. And I made him a promise right there and then that I would continue to tell this story and do what I could to remember those men. So that is the background of why I did what I did. I work at the Orillia Public Library, and every year we do a remembrance event. And when we got started, it was to honor World War I. And I started doing research on local soldiers. And all of a sudden a light bulb went off, and I thought, I've been doing genealogy research my whole life. All of the regiments, but I focused on the Royal Regiment because it's my dad's regiment. They never got, they weren't credited. They were, my dad always felt like he was a failure because of what happened. He had survivor guilt. And I thought, if I can research these local World War I soldiers for my event, it'll be a piece of cake to research the men from the Royal Regiment. And then I discovered that there were others that landed at Puy. So a company of the Black Watch, C Company, the 3rd Light Anti-Aircraft, the 4th Field Regiment. And I thought, they're not even on a nominal roll anywhere. Well, the Black Watch is, but the artillery regiments are. And I thought, they're not even remembered on a list. So I thought, I have to do this. I have the tools. I love to research, and I have the passion. And so that is how this got started. It was supposed to be a quick research project, and we thought we could have it done by the 75th in 2017. We started late in 2015, and then it exploded. And I had to find families in order to get POW information and photos. And we became a community of Dieppe kids. We all get each other because we all have the same thing in common. So that is basically the background of the Dieppe Blue Beach Every Man Remember project.
It's great. I just want to put that up on the screen too. I'm just going to throw that on the screen for you so that you can all see the organization Every Man Remembered. If you haven't, she's got a wonderful newsletter that comes out monthly. I recommend, if you're not on it already and you want to know more about all the incredible, Jane, do you mind just letting us know, can you give us like a few of your highlights, what you've seen? Because even recently you discovered something new and you made a new connection. So is there a highlight for you?
There are so many. We'd be here all day just talking about the highlights. The people that I've met, I have lifelong friends. The people are incredible that I've met through this, including yourself. But the families, when I'm able to tell a family what happened to their father, and they can get some healing from this and move on and not have those, angry feelings towards the memory of their father, then I've accomplished something. I found, Bob Wigness, for example, Sam tracked down his photo for me out in Saskatchewan. He was a Métis, and he joined the Royal Regiment, and he was a prisoner of war, and he kept making escapes. And he ended up on a train, on the top of a train, and was shot and fell under the train and was killed. There's a man out west who, his goal is to put a plaque on the ground in front of the lakes out in Saskatchewan, because out there, most of the lakes are named after fallen soldiers. So he sent me footage of him going in to this lodge at Wigness Lake and unveiling this plaque to Bob Wigness. And that was pretty powerful. The success stories of the POWs have been a highlight. One man was walking around the court of the prison camp. He had been put in solitary confinement for escaping. And there were some Americans there. And he said, if I get out of this alive, I'm going to go somewhere warm. And when he got back, he moved to Hawaii and he opened a nightclub. And he had people like Elvis and Bob Hope and Carol Burnett perform at his nightclub. So like I said, I could go on and on, but it's the family connections. I connected this week with the cousin of Padre Foote, who won the Victoria Cross. So now I have that connection. She's not on today because she's at the RHLI ceremony. But it's like every day there's a new connection or a new person or a new story coming. So it's been an incredible journey, and I can't stop. It's a passion. Absolutely.
I do feel like every time I talk to Jane, she's got another bombshell for me that's like, what? And I remember when, there's so many names that there's so many names that Glenn and I were familiar with while studying Dieppe. It was so wild to meet these people in real life, with these last names that have been ingrained in battlefield guides for so many years, and to realize that these are real people, that these are real families. I remember that being really shocking to both Glenn and I. Absolutely. I've got a few more questions for you, Jane, but if we can turn our attention to O'Keefe. David, how are you doing?
Good. How are you? And maybe we don't necessarily turn away from Jane. Let me tell you about Jane.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what Jane means to me and what she means to this. Jane and I met probably about 11 years ago, and it was in the early filming of Dieppe Uncovered. Unfortunately, poor Jane was left on the cutting room floor. Nothing to do with Jane. It just happened to be the way the documentary went. But when we met her, she told us the same story. And of course, as a military historian, particularly a Canadian military historian, you can't escape Dieppe. Everything in World War II is measured by Dieppe, the worst day in Canadian military history. And if I was writing about Normandy, and I'm sure Alex Black and Mike Bechtold and everybody else who's done it understands, you're always measuring it by that yardstick. And of course, there was the great mystery surrounding it, etc. But I think what I loved about Jane was, here was this vehicle to the human side of this story. That's probably the best way I can put it. And when we met, she told the same story about her father. And then we met up again on the 70th anniversary. And at that time, she told me that she was considering this idea, this idea of going back and never leaving anybody behind. And of course, putting all the pictures on the graves. And I thought what an absolutely brilliant idea this was. Didn't think she could pull it off. She did. But it was absolutely amazing. And because for so many times, think about all the books you have read, books that you have encountered about battles, and it's Corporal Bloggins was killed here. Nobody knows anything about Corporal Bloggins, do they? He's just a name. Well, Jane actually started moving in a different direction. And to be honest with you, it had a massive influence on me. When I wrote my last book about the Black Watch at Verrières, I decided I was going to follow kind of in Jane's footsteps, and I was going to take a look at the personnel files and go in depth. So when we're talking about, for instance, a private Bloggins, even though it's just an extra line or two, in other words, Corporal Bloggins, before he joined the war, was an attendant in the emergency ward at the Montreal Children's Hospital. It's little things like this that help bring back the memory, help bring back the dignity of these particular men. And that's exactly how Jane has influenced me as a historian. And then, of course, the other thing that we touched on before, you guys touched on before, is the dramatic impact that this particular day had on those men. And that was something that became quite intense during the filming of Dieppe Uncovered when we were interviewing these men. Sadly, at this point, Jane's father had passed away and we didn't get a chance to talk to him, but we did talk to, for instance, Ron Beale and Ted Bennett, Howard Large, and they all had the same story that Jane's father had. That idea that their war, after waiting from 1939 or 40, whenever they, joined up, until 1942, to quote, get at them, as, Ron Beale told me, their war lasted 6 hours, or at least I should say their battle lasted 6 hours. Their war continued until the end, and then even beyond. Because once they were marched off the beach after watching, like Ron did and Jane's father, watching their friends be ripped apart in front of their eyes, they had then to endure another 2.5, almost 3 years in a German prisoner of war camp, and then being forced marched across in the winter of 1945 across Central Europe. And when they came home, I would argue that this is almost the saddest part of it all, is when they came home, they were pariahs. They didn't fit in. Because their units, remember, if you're in the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry, the Essex Scottish, the Royal Regiment, the South Saskatchewans, the Camerons, and goes on, the FMR, you suffered anywhere between 75 and 95% casualties. The entire 2nd Division, except for the 5th Brigade, had to be completely rebuilt. So as a result, these were the nucleus that survived the war. They had the stories of fighting in Normandy, liberating France, liberating Belgium, liberating Holland, and delivering them from the evils of Nazism and, of course, famine, and defeating Germany. And then, of course, when the Dieppe veterans came home, they didn't necessarily fit in. They were square pegs in round holes when they got back into the mess. And so as a result, as Jane calls it, kind of survivor's guilt, not only for surviving the raid, but now not really having a place to fit in, they bonded together and they created their Dieppe Veterans Association. And I used to see it at the Black Watch. I used to see the guys who were with the 1st Battalion from 44 and 45, and then I would see the ones that survived 42 at Dieppe. And very rarely did their paths necessarily cross, or did they kind of hang out? And that, for me, has always been that stinging legacy of the Dieppe Raid for these poor guys. And in part, that has kind of fueled what my research was about, but it also meshes into what Jane's been doing. And, one of the reasons why I hold her in very high esteem is because of that quest to restore dignity. And I think she's done a fantastic job doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience with Dieppe's been, David? Because you've been over there filming. I'd love to know what that was like, but also and I should say before we even get into that, what was it like for you? What was your first experience like in Dieppe? And the same question for Jane, please. That would be wonderful.
Well, when I arrived, I think the first time I was ever in Dieppe was in 1989. It was when the Berlin Wall was falling, and I rushed over to Europe, as most budding historians probably wanted to do. And we pulled into Dieppe at, I think it was, well, probably only about 5 o'clock, but it was already dark. And there was only one hotel that was open. We grabbed a room, and then very quickly unloaded everything and walked down to the beach. And I walked down, and of course, over the slate and, shale, and then down to the water line and turned around. And I have to be honest with you, and this is maybe a little blue for the morning, but when I looked up, my first impression, my gut impression was, what the fuck were you thinking? And I don't think, and excuse me for the language, but that's the honest truth. And I think there's a lot of people who probably feel the same way. What were you thinking when you see the line of hotels in front of you? You see the distance before you get there. You see the two cliffs on each side. It hits you and it kicks you in the gut like nothing else I've ever encountered in military history. And I've been lucky enough to be on mountains in Italy and under Vimy Ridge and all these other things. There is nothing that hits you like that. And so that was my first visceral reaction to it. And then I calmed down and had a drink. But other than that, that was pretty much it.
How about for you, Jane? What was your first time at Dieppe?
Well, my brother and sister got to go, excuse me, with my dad in '87. I had just had my daughter and didn't feel comfortable leaving an infant. So I didn't go, which I regret. However, my dad passed in 2005. So in 2007, I booked a tour through the British Legion. And it was a British tour company. And the guide was very, wore a suit all the time, very prim and proper, wonderful. And my Aunt Isabel was there, my dad's little sister, and she had never been to Dieppe either. And we got to Puy, and I walked down, and my feet, it was like quicksand in the stones. And I had the same reaction, only I used hell. I said, what the hell were they thinking? And this poor British tour, I just had a meltdown. I started crying and like, I was uncontrollable. This poor man came over with his handkerchief and said, "Madam, are you okay?" And all I said was, "Give me 5 minutes to process this." And I walked by myself and I did my little crying and whatever. And then I was fine. But I just, you hear about it your whole life. And I always heard my dad referring to Main Beach and Blue Beach, and until you're there and you walk it and you look up and you see that it's an impossible situation, it's mind blowing. And I've had a similar, I've been there twice after that, so 3 times, similar reaction, but not quite. I didn't have a meltdown. So, but yeah, it's
You never tend to read another account, whether it be a secondary source or a primary source, the same way again after actually being there, seeing the terrain, hearing the sounds, smelling the air. There is something about being there live and the atmosphere when you go back and read the pages, regardless, like I said, whether it's a secondary or primary source account, it just jumps off the page because you suddenly immersed yourself in it. And that's, one of the reasons why I always encourage people to make pilgrimages. Go there, see it for yourself. The terrain is in many cases one of the most instructive primary sources that you can find.
It's so true. It is one of those places. And I say that on tour all the time. I found it very interesting. I was asking David O'Keefe and Jane and I had a conversation the other day, and it hadn't occurred to me because as a little girl, my dad always dragged us to Dieppe, you know, as kids. But for me, Dieppe was one of the first places that what my dad was doing and what, you know, having veterans coming over, for me, I had my aha moment in Dieppe, and I was very, very young, but playing on the beach. And it's the first time that I, you know, was having fun on the beach. Dieppe is a beautiful place. If you've never been, it's so much fun, and there's so much vibrancy in life. So my understanding of Dieppe was very different from what I was seeing around me. And it was the first time that I saw a veteran crying on the beach. I'll never forget that moment. And I think I've always, I think my whole life, I have been fighting against that memory, because I wish that I ran up to him. I wish I was old enough or mature enough or what to say, don't cry, look at everything around us, you know, look what you did, you know. It's something that will always stick with me, and Dieppe has always been a very special place in my heart. You know, look at those pebbles, look at that cliff. It's an impossible situation. And the citizens of Dieppe, remember, the citizens of Dieppe, their connection to Canada is really great and really special. And I think the citizens of Dieppe taught me a lot about, I mean, not just about Dieppe, but just of French culture. I think the relationships that you build in this place are so special because this connection is already there, you know. We have a few people raising their hands. Are you guys ready to go? Hi, I'll start with, I'm going to unshare the screen just for a moment, because a few of you have raised your hands, and I would love to pay attention to that. Okay, so Rob, did you want to go first? How are you?
Good morning from London, Ontario. I thank you for acknowledging me. My keyboard has died, and I've actually got a call into IT for 10 o'clock to fix this. Quick question. These are my uncle's medals. He's got the France-Germany star because luckily he survived Dieppe and got back to Normandy at the end of June to fight in the Normandy campaign. The one thing I've never been able to find out is because he was Toronto Scottish, which was the machine gun regiment that supported the division at Dieppe, whether or not he made it onto the beach. I've been told that only 125 of the Tor Scots made it onto the beach. Only one was killed, but I've never been able to find out if he made it. I spoke to him when I was much younger. I didn't have the maturity to ask the right questions, and he wasn't talking much at that time, but I did get a few stories from him. How do I find out if he landed at Dieppe, if he was one of the 125? And where do I go to get that? And I'll mute and stop my video. And if I have to leave at 10, thanks for entertaining my question.
Is Tim Stewart on here?
Yeah.
I'll go in a gallery view for everyone.
Tim might know how, I'm not sure if he made it on or not. If you could email me, Rob, at dieppebluebeach@gmail.com, I'll put you in touch with Tim. Tim is a bit of an expert on the Toronto Scottish.
Yeah, I would argue it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one because sometimes there will be lists of the people, not the people per se and their names, but the amount of people on a particular landing craft. So it's going to be difficult to actually pinpoint whether he made it or not. That'll take a lot of sleuthing. I mean, you'd have to start with the war diary. There may be something in the appendices of a war diary where he actually gave an account. There's always a possibility that if he survived the raid, as you say, obviously he did, that maybe he was interviewed about that. That's always a possibility. Now, remember, I always caution people when you're going to war diaries, there's 3 copies of war diaries, and they do not all have the identical appendices. All right. So there's one copy in England, which usually does not have them. Then there's one copy at the LAC in Ottawa. They will have some of the appendices. And then if you get in touch with the actual regiment, they will have a copy. and usually there are others there. So that would be my first stop, would to go, you know, right down the middle. Okay, go straight down the middle and try to get that kind of information from the regiment. There could be others. I mean, there could be some memoirs that might be there, that somebody mentions him, things like that. But as far as I know, I don't think I have ever seen any listings for landing craft that have specific names of people and their units. Now, sometimes they will say X amount from the Tor Scots, but they're not going to list who they are. So it
Right.
may be just a question of process of elimination where you start figuring it out. I mean, it's, you know, it's not going to be easy. Hopefully not a Hail Mary, but not easy.
Thank you. And I see the email address in the chat box. So thank you very much, Samantha. And I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for this.
Thanks, Rob.
Honors
Thanks.
to all of you for doing this. Thank you.
Doug, I saw Doug, you actually raised your hand, so I'll give you first. But Alex, I know you've got a meeting. Alex, I'll let Alex go first, and then Doug, if that's all right.
I managed to move it, so go ahead with somebody else. It's okay.
Really? Yes. Okay, great. Doug, you can go first. Bless Alex.
Hi, everybody. My name is Doug Surfless. My dad was Sergeant Charles Surfless. He was with D Company. He was in the second wave, and he was a prisoner of war for well, from that time on. And again, I got to thank Jane, because my dad was one of the ones that didn't talk. He was, I spent my entire life trying to figure out a couple of lines that he said to me. And, you know, when he said he was going across the channel, he was so dark that could actually touch the ships that they were trying to get by. When he landed, he jumped into 12 feet of water because he was a sergeant. So he was at the back of the landing craft. By the time he got to the front of the landing craft, it was reversing. So physics took over, and he jumped in. And as he said, they didn't have Velcro in those days. So he stripped down to what he could, got to the wall, grabbed a Bren, got to the wall. I asked him, how did he get there? And he said, I have no idea. I have no idea. He got to the wall, and then there's the part that comes out. He got behind, but the house at the top was right up there. So he started to draw fire onto it. He said that was the worst day. He said everybody turned onto him, and the Germans were throwing over grenades from the cliffs. And then all of a sudden, this guy landed on him, and he was Bill Oliver, and he had been in the first wave. He was on B Company, and he got in, and he got over the wall. He was with Lieutenant Webb in that group, and he was killed and a few others. So he said, okay, I got to run back. And he jumped over the wall and he landed on my father. And they didn't know each other, because at that time the companies were all basically their own clubs. And they stuck together, and they became good friends. But here's the story. My father was a police officer when he came back. He got liberated. He was in the Death March. He was liberated May 2nd. I got his diary. It says 1:30. Liberated by the Wiltshire Regiment. It was a British regiment, armored. Got back, got discharged at the exhibition, walked into one of the buildings there, became a Toronto police officer. September of 1945, he walks into his class, and who's sitting there? Bill Oliver, Jimmy Donalds, Cam Brown. They all thought they were dead. They all, because my dad was a sergeant, Bill was not, so he went to work parties. They were all in different parts of the camps, and they all thought they perished. And for 40 years, they worked together as on the Toronto Police.
Wow.
So it's so another thing too is that I got to thank David, because for years, my father, I wish he was alive today to hear and see your documentary, read your book one day in August, which is an excellent book. And because you've given, I think, all of our fathers a status as they had a purpose. He said, okay, maybe it was because the Russians were putting pressure on them to open a second front. They needed to test, they needed to do this. But like he had nothing good to say about Bomber Harris, because they felt they were let down. There's a lot of angst. And then now that you have brought up, hey, there was a purpose, I think he would have shook your hand and said thank you. Jane, without Jane, and this group, I have found out so much about Dieppe, the families, what, you know, they all went through, but I can't thank her enough every day, you know, with, because I'm a Dieppe kid. I have, you know, still got answers. I'm still looking for answers. But in 1977, I went to the 35th anniversary, went with my dad and my mom, and there were still so many veterans there. Like, it was still, it's packed. We were in Dieppe, didn't pay for a meal, you know, it was this type of thing, you know, it just, we were looked after. So on the day, the 19th, a ragtag band in Dieppe there, you know, they're, you know, marching down the street and everybody's cheering. And we got to the beach right where that ramp is, and all of a sudden, silence. It was like all the veterans went on the beach, some went to the wall, some went to the water, some went someplace, and it was silent. You could only hear the seagulls. And then all of a sudden, one of the guys turned around and did one of those whistles, and then the band played, and they all ran. The whole town went down on the beach. They were cheering, you know, they're patting everyone on the back, and it was quite something. And then when we went back to New Haven, again, I'm a 15-year-old. I was a sponge. I was listening to everything, and all these veterans, and I was at the back of the boat, and they were all having cigars and scotch and drinking, and it was all mixture of the regiments there. And so then one guy got up and he says, "Okay, boys, we finally did it. We're going back. Took us 35 years, but here's to it." So anyway, that was the kind of group. And if I just want to finish off, is that what David had said about the association. So the Royal Regiment of Canada is my regiment. I'm in the regiment. So is my son. He's a corporal now. So we have 3 generations there. But the there is a separate Dieppe. So the guys that were at Dieppe and then came back into the Royals Association had their own association and did not mix with the other associations there, because who had gone to D-Day, down on the other campaigns, because they didn't even like each other, to be honest with you. They didn't even mingle. And it's not they didn't like each other, but they had different experiences, because whenever they were in parades and all that, they were all always by themselves, because they were the Dieppe guys, and then the D-Day guys were always over there because of the different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And and then Joe Ryan, he was very much involved. He was, but nevertheless, I'll get off this so other people can talk. But I look forward to meeting you, David, when we go overseas. I'm going, and Jane, you're amazing. Thank you, David, for that purpose for our fathers. Thank you. I just wanted to say that. And I'll mute it.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful. A few other hands raised. If you have something to say, feel free to raise your hand and I'll just go in order. But I recommend everyone, what an opportunity to talk to you all and to get this background history. We learn something new every day. I want to introduce everyone to Alex, who's with us from the Juneau Beach Center. Hi, Alex. I'll pass this on to you now if you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Okay, great. Let me give you host. I'll also say Frances Flint just sent me a message saying she has to leave. Goodbye, Frances. It was so wonderful to see you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to let you know that, can I share what you just sent to me, Frances? Awesome. She was just saying, as a family, we went to the 20th anniversary in 1962 with the first stop in the UK at Stansted Airport, and the Queen's emissary greeted us, and there was some champagne flowing. Wow. What a lovely ceremony. The trip to Dieppe and Puy was also memorable. The mayor of Dieppe provided a luncheon, which was lovely. There are many stories and pictures from our family's trips to the anniversaries before our father passed away in 1986. 1986, wow. Wow. Frances has been on tour with us before. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so sorry that you have to leave, but it'll all be recorded for you later. We're sending our love. Okay. All right. Alex, I'll pass it on to you now. I'll let you're now host. So take it away.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so very much, Sam. Thank you, David, and thank you, Jane, for putting together this lovely gathering here. And thank you to everybody who's been sharing stories about loved ones who served at Dieppe and who experienced that horror. This is kind of an exclusive. I mean, it's not going to be exclusive for very long, but you guys are all going to be the first folks outside of the Juno Beach Center staff to get a look at this trailer that I want to share with you. And I'll get it started right now. So let me make sure. Let me stop for a second and make sure I hit the audio button too, because otherwise it's not going to be very fun for everybody. All right, let me know if you guys, give me a thumbs up if you can hear this when it starts.
Oh, sure.
Wow. So I'll stop it there, but I won't stop sharing my screen. I've got a web page that actually just went live for everybody to take a look at. If you go on our website later this afternoon, you'll find this. This is our promotional poster, actually somewhat inspired by the cover of David's book, One Day in August. The photograph is from the same series of photographs, I believe, that adorn the cover of his book. And this is going to be a very special exhibit for the Juno Beach Center, coming at a very important time. The museum, the last year or so, almost 2 years now, I suppose, has been enduring COVID-19 just as we all have. You know, it's been closed, it's been open. Obviously, we're not getting the number of visitors we normally expect. And we're really hoping, you know, as I know Sam is as well, that revenge tourism does become a thing next year, and that people want to travel overseas to visit. You know, next year is the 105th anniversary of Dieppe Ridge. It's the 80th anniversary of the Dieppe Raid, and we wanted to make sure that the Juno Beach Center was kind of part of that circuit, if you will. Because if you're going to go to those two sites, you know, you should make it down to the Juno Beach Center as well. It's, you know, I don't know what it is, like a 3 or 4 hour drive, but certainly it's going to take a good day of your time. To promote the exhibition, we've been doing something really special today on Twitter. And I know not everybody is on Twitter. This was actually the idea, David O'Keefe's idea. And what we're doing is we're tweeting out messages that were sent between various headquarters during the Dieppe Raid, you know, between the headquarters ships, between the Royal Air Force number 11 group back in the UK, you know, trying to get a sense of what was going on, because of course those commanders were not operating in a crystal clear environment. And so we have this page here that you can again find on our website, and it's going to have all of the message logs or message forms that we're posting, so you can check them out. And we've been publishing them in real time throughout the morning, and they'll I think the last one is at about 1:45 or something like that. We did it, you know, Eastern time in Canada, because if we started posting at 5 a.m., you know, in France time, it would be midnight here, and, you know, a few people would see it. So we started at 5:28 in the morning Eastern time here. So definitely check that out if you'd like. And there'll be more information about the exhibit forthcoming. I'll just give you a quick rundown of some of the features. I mean, some of them were present in the trailer there. You know, we're not attempting to create a definitive narrative or anything like that around the Dieppe Raid. We're trying to kind of give everybody, you know, give various voices. Trying to move this out of the way so I can get to what I want. There we go. We're trying to include various voices, voices of soldiers, voices of the French civilians, voices of the prisoners of war afterwards, voices of historians who have, you know, debated about the raid for decades. You know, if you can cut war correspondence, even some German voices, you know, the defenders at Dieppe. And it's just, we find it just so very important to be doing this. And this is already something that's been said here today. You know, you could probably count on a couple of hands how many Dieppe veterans we have left. There are certainly far more Normandy and late war veterans left because they tended to be, or at least the ones that are still with us, tended to be a little younger, right? If you were at 18 at Dieppe, you were a little older than if you were 18 at D-Day. So, you know, obviously, so very few, you know, on a relative scale, so many few survived. We're losing that direct link to our history, but as we've seen the strength of various family members here today still telling those stories, and we want to continue to tell that story at Juno Beach. Just to clarify the title as well, as I just said, you know, we're not going to make any definitive statements, if you will. I think that's our intent. From Dieppe to Juno is not meant to get you in the mindset that Dieppe necessarily led to success on Juno Beach or on D-Day. But rather what we're going to be doing is pulling things full circle between Dieppe and the liberation of Dieppe in 1944, which for the Canadians, even Second Division, you know, most of those forces came ashore around Juno Beach. And so there's a linkage there that we want to take advantage of. And, you know, I mean, that is an opinion that still exists, you know, that D-Day was influenced by Dieppe, and perhaps it was. I mean, I have my feelings on it, and David has his, and I'm sure Sam has hers, and everybody, you know, but it's, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because, you know, that's the title might suggest that, but really it's to connect things full circle, because we didn't want to just tell a 9-hour story, if you will. We wanted to tell the whole story with the context. And coming into, there will even be a section, literally there will be a zone in the exhibit that discusses some of the things we've been talking about today in terms of the legacy of Dieppe and what it means to Canadians and what it means to other people. And, you know, even that issue about the service medal, right? You know, we're going to have a Canadian Volunteer Service Medal with the Dieppe bar, and we'll let that do the talking in terms of, you know, why did it take so long for the veterans to be recognized in this particular instance? So thanks for your time. I didn't want to take up too much more than that, but, you know, keep your eyes and ears peeled for more news about the exhibit. And we hope that you'll consider visiting the Juno Beach Center next year. And by the way, the exhibit will be around at least until the end of 2023. So you've got a little bit of time there. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was hoping you would say. I was like, will it last a long time just in case? Thank you so much, Alex. And everyone at the Juno Beach Center, you guys are awesome. And if there's a few tour operators in the audience right now, I know other friends that work with different companies. So maybe this is more of an insider fact for tour operators, but it's so exciting that the French Tourist Board is working on Canadian specific programming, partnering Dieppe and Juno. It's really hard. If anyone's like Googling battlefield tours, it's really hard to find a Canadian tour that goes out to Dieppe, specifically one that is partnering Juno Beach and the Dieppe Memorial Museum. And those are two, the Juno Beach Center and the Memorial Museum are two Canadian museums that we need to support. We'll talk a lot about that coming through the fall as we prepare for the Remembrance Run. So thanks, Alex, for all you do. Alex, can you quickly just let everyone know what your role is at the foundation?
Yeah, sorry, everybody. I should have started with that. So I work for the Juno Beach Center Association, and we're based in Burlington, Ontario, and we're the charity that owns and operates the Juno Beach Center. We provide a number of the resources in terms of the historical resources for the museum, as well as doing the fundraising and everything like that. One last thing I'll add, you notice I'm wearing a cap. It's a Spitfire cap. Maybe there was something negative said about the Air Force before I came on. That's okay. People can have their opinions and everything, but I just don't want to, the soldiers who landed at Dieppe and suffered, those are the ones we absolutely need to remember, but we cannot also forget that the Air Force played a significant role in them. For the most part, they did their best. Certainly the pilots did their best to cover the operation. Very few vessels were actually struck or sunk by German air forces. And so that part of the raid, from the Air Force's perspective, was quite successful. And I don't know if they could have done much more to alleviate the number of casualties. Certainly the planning could have been better, but can't forget them as well. 12 Canadians, 12 RCAF badged Canadians were killed on the 19th or died of their wounds sustained on the 19th. So lest we forget them as well.
Absolutely, 100%. And I will say, I mean, Daniel Jaspar, the group's director at the Memorial Museum, we posted a video of him on our YouTube channel just last week. If you don't know him, he's an incredible human being, but he's the group's director at the Memorial Museum in Dieppe. And unfortunately, the Wi-Fi and the signal at the Memorial Museum is awful. So
just like at the Juno Beach Center, that's why I'm coming to you from here.
Oh, that's why. Well, no, I mean, I prefer a strong signal than in the museum. We've got plenty of footage of the museum anyways, but Daniel always said, because he grew up in Dieppe and his mother he very much remembers the raid, and he said that he always says with every group, with every person, if you ask him about those memories, he says, I remember the flying, and he'll go like this with his hands and say, my mother will talk about the pilots in the sky fighting, and that has always stuck with me. A few of you are saying that you can't message. I had this a few times. You can't message the main group and you're just messaging me instead of everyone. There is try coming in and out of the video if you want to see if it's not working, just message me again. I'm going to move on to Paula. Paula, you've got your hand up. Hi, how are you? Oh, you're on mute. I'll ask you to unmute.
There, is that better?
Yep.
Okay. So Alex, you mentioned something about the Canadian government is now going to strike a medal or a bar for those who participated at Dieppe. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
So that happened in the 90s, in the 1990s, and I don't know the full story. Jane could probably speak to that better than I could.
So
they struck the medal or the bar then.
So as a surviving family member, my uncle, who perished at Dieppe, how do I go about getting a medal on his behalf? Would they provide one to me?
Yeah, I think they would. You'd need to write to Veterans Affairs Canada and explain the situation.
Okay.
And they'd probably, I think this is pretty standard. They're able to issue new bars and new medals as new information comes forward, that sort of thing. Some veterans just didn't claim their medals after the war for whatever reason. So
okay, great, thank you.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
So first of all, Alex, sorry about the Air Force thing. That was just,
it's okay. I know that's the impression. That's the impression the
veterans
veterans
from his
were left
words.
with.
So those pilots were top notch, absolutely. But to Paula, with regards to the medal, so there's three medals. There's the France-Germany one, but there's also the Arctic one, because when they went from Iceland and then they came up, they had to avoid the U-boats. They went beyond that line that they would qualify for the Arctic medal. And there's also a medal called the POW medal. It's the British created it, and it was for the Australians, New Zealanders, was for Canadians, but the Canadian government said no. It's a beautiful medal. It's the ribbon. It's got barbed wire down the middle, but it wasn't struck for us. So myself and Doug Oliver, who father I mentioned earlier, so we were looking into this. The medal, we can't, because they gave the bar to the Dieppe prisoners of war and the Hong Kong prisoners of war, they won't give it. You can purchase it online and put it with the medals, but you can't put it with the other medals because it's not in the Gazette. In order to have medals to wear, your name has to be in the Canadian Gazette to be official. Now, the France, Germany, everybody here will agree that they should have gotten it because they were in France and Germany longer than anybody else. However, because they got the bar, took so long to get that bar, they won't issue that medal now to dependents like us. However, if you go online, you can get that medal and buy it, and then you can put it with the collection separate, just like when they but that's, and the same with, but however, the Arctic and the POW medal is something that myself and a couple others are looking into. But the France Germany medal, they were actually given to some of the soldiers, and then they were, as Jane had explained earlier, they just took them off, and some of them just got rid of them because they were so ticked. But I never saw that with my father. I never saw that medal. I only saw, but he was he pushed for some kind of recognition, and that's what they did. They gave him. Now that bar is very unique, and it's it's valuable because it's unique that way, and it's only given to Hong Kong and Dieppe prisoners of war. But the medal itself can't get. So anyway, and I wanted to apologize to Alex for my but
building relationships. Hey,
there you go. So I just say, but if you have any questions, go through Jane, get my information, and then I'm looking into it myself.
Great. And also
Thank
everyone. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Of course. Thank you so much. Also, just to let you know, I have fixed the chat. I found a button that we needed, so you can all talk to each other again in that chat. Does anyone else? I have a few people that I would like to call on, but does anyone else want to share what their connection is to Dieppe? Feel free to raise your hand. Yep. David is reminding me. Oh, we've got Carol. Wonderful. Yeah, there's freedom for sure. I will just say very quickly, and I may have mentioned this before, I will definitely mention this at the end of this conversation, but later today on World War II TV with Paul Woodage, David O'Keefe, and Alex will be back online, and we're going to investigate the battle, the raid further. So definitely take a look at that, and I will share that link in this chat on Facebook and YouTube, because I will definitely be watching. Paul was in Dieppe a couple days ago filming, so we get to see kind of what Dieppe's looking like right now. Without further ado, Carol, hello, how are you? Thank you for coming, and what would you like to share with us today?
Hi, my dad was John Austin Neame, and he didn't talk much about Dieppe. There's a few experiences it was he landed on the beach and everybody was shot down around him, and he said he never could eat pizza anymore because it didn't appeal to him. But he was captured and he went to Stalag 8B or something, I think.
Yep.
And I want to thank Jane for getting in touch with me, because before this I had no idea what my dad went through. I know he didn't talk about it much, but I'm glad Jane got in touch with me, and I'm more aware of what he did go through.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you, Carol. What's your father's name again? Sorry.
It was John Neame, Neame.
Neame. Okay. I'm going to write that in the chat for everyone.
He was actually a really good friend of my dad's too. So my
Really?
dad used to go and visit him from Aurelia. He was just north of Aurelia. So yeah.
Ron, hello. How are you? Hey, buddy. Oh, hold on. You're on mute. I'll ask you to unmute.
How's that?
Great.
Okay, yes. We were with you in 2017 for the anniversary. My dad was killed at Dieppe. Was with the Royal Canadian Engineers, was killed on White Beach. He was supposed to blow up some cranes, I understand, but didn't get off the beach. But we didn't hear much about Dieppe when I was young because, well, my father didn't come back. But my cousin, who was much younger, was with him in the same unit. And although he was badly wounded, he actually was able to swim back out to a landing craft and haul himself aboard. But he never spoke of Dieppe ever for the next 30 years until he died. Although he always walked with his leg in a brace, he drove a car with hand controls only. Not one word about Dieppe would he utter. And so I didn't hear a lot about it. Of course, we talked a lot about my dad when I was young, but the first I really heard a lot about Dieppe was with you and the tour in 2017. And I want to thank you so much for all the effort that you and Paul and everybody put into that and into this broadcast as well, and all the work you've done. And Jane, everything that you have done to keep the memory alive. So, and oh, well, one other thing I'd like to say is, yes, I had the same experience as David O'Keefe when I first visited Dieppe. I had attended the Royal Military College. I served as a junior officer with the Royal Canadian Regiment, and when I looked on that beach, I thought, how the hell would I lead a platoon across this beach, looking up at those cliffs? Anyway, it was just awe-inspiring to have that experience, and it was. I just wanted to say for David, I had exactly the same experience when I first visited Dieppe. We've been there a couple of times now. But thank you, Sam, for everything you've done.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Thanks for coming. And it's so wonderful to see your face again. How wild is that? So wild.
May see you next year there.
All right. Sounds good, buddy. Absolutely. Sounds good. A couple more hands up. I will choose Dawn, of course. Hi, buddy. How are you? Oh, I have to unmute you. I keep forgetting. I get so excited to see all your faces. And then Ross, you'll be up next. Oh, I still have to get you guys to unmute. I'm asking. There will be a big button on your screen. While they're figuring that out, Ross, I think I'll let you go first. Okay?
Okay.
How are you? Hello.
I'm good.
Thanks for coming.
I'm good. Thanks for letting me speak, Sam. I'd like to thank Jane. Sometime in 2017, I came across some information, and we have one of the people on our cenotaph, our war memorial, Ernest Good, who was killed at Dieppe. And we have, through Jane, we have found 5 other people who were from the area who should be honored. And we're going through a process now to get our cenotaph hopefully upgraded and add some names. And at the same time, through the intervention of Jane and pointing me in the right directions, we have been able to get a number of people honored by having parks named after them. And we will have probably sometime this year or next year, we will have the Charles Hill Park and then the Thomas Miller Armstrong Park with the appropriate dedications. And And thanks to Jane for editing some of the stuff that we get. Because at one point in time, they were going to put a picture up that was not Blue Beach. And it was the standard picture of Dieppe with the half-track car kind of sitting on the beach. But the one that she provided was excellent. And seeing that house on the top of the hill and the history behind the house and everything else is just adds to the history of everything. And the most appropriate thing, one of the things about the Charles Hill Park I've got to add is Barbara Stanworth, I believe, is on the call. And she was Charles's niece. And she provided pictures. Charles's park is adjacent to a creek. As a boy, Charles used to play in that creek. And that is so appropriate that park is going to be named after Charles. And I have trouble with that, by the way.
Yeah.
And we have Ernest Good Street, or Good Street in Richmond Hill. And we are waiting for the poppy to be put in it, but we have William Adams Lane. Now, William returned, but he was a POW. And his street is going to have a poppy placed on it, hopefully this year. But we continue to look to get these streets and these parks named after our veterans, and hopefully at some point in time, all 6 names will be on our war memorial.
Oh, that's so wonderful. That's
And I would say add one thing. A lot of the research on these people done by our summer students that we have, that and they dig into, and they're sitting in on this call today.
Hey, thank you.
So thank you very much.
That's
Thanks,
so
Jane.
wonderful.
Thanks,
And
Barbara.
And I would just like to throw myself in here. I keep hearing my name and I'm honored for everybody thanking me and everything, but there's other people who, I'm gonna cry, but I'm sorry for that, but there's other people who have helped out. My brother, who's probably on this call, Joyce Lang, who has nothing to do with Dieppe. She has no connection, but she has jumped on board, looked for people, she's tracked people down. You know, I could go on and on and on. Doug Oliver, Doug Surfless. There's been many people. Barb, I can see Barb there. Barb set up an appointment for me to go down to a little archive down in Richmond Hill where I found 3 missing photos. So I could go on and on and on. Like I said, I'd be here all day, but there are others, so it's not just me. You know, I thank you for honoring me this way, but oh wow, look at that newspaper that Ron has. Is that your dad on there, Ron?
Yeah, London Free Press, September 18th. And there's something here about the Essex Scottish that somebody just mentioned, right?
Yeah,
I keep getting everything backwards on this Zoom stuff.
Yeah, it's backwards.
Anyway, yeah, the London Free Press, September 18th. And that's my dad with the casualties. And of course, they're all listed here. You know, just all the names. I guess you can't see it very well.
Yeah, it blurs out.
Blurs
at
out.
a certain point.
Yeah. Anyway, it brings back a lot of memories. But anyhow.
Big time. Thank you for sharing that. There we go. Can we all see everyone now?
Oh.
Terry, Barb, and Brian, how are you? I'll ask you to unmute.
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. It's so nice to see everyone. The bond that has been formed over this last 4 years is unbelievable. I just wanted to add this parquet that would be named for my uncle's memory. At first, I didn't want to do this. I felt as though all the men that were in the Second World War were heroes. And yet Jane convinced me that it was a memory that needed to be told. And I'm so thankful for that. In my family, there were many that served. My dad served. He never went overseas. My uncle served. And you mentioned the Essex Scottish. There were a number of friends that my dad had that were in the Essex Scottish. The one point I just wanted to add about this, this plaque, there is going to be a picture on that plaque. And until this year, we had never seen this picture. It was sent to us from a second cousin in England. And that picture was of my grandmother and grandfather and Charlie. Charlie was 19 when he left to go. And it was the last picture that was taken of the three of them. I just cannot to get this picture now of all times. And Ross was getting emotional about where this plaque is going to be within
walking distance,
less than a mile away from the house. It's like Charlie was saying, don't forget me. And it changed my grandmother totally. The night that Charlie was going on that boat across the channel, they had a little dog. The dog's name was Buddy. He was a little Jack Russell. And that dog howled at the foot of my grandmother's bed on Oak Avenue in Richville. And it woke her up. And it was like, you know, everyone knows that that was his time. The Lord called him home. So it's something that I always heard this story, and my grandmother, her mind was changed that day. So each one of us has a story to tell. We're a part of the story and we're still active. So as long as we can tell a story, tell the story. Do it on Facebook. I'm doing it today in memory of a man that I met who read this poem. You'll see it on my Facebook page today. He was a great poet, and he read it at the anniversary, the 217, when you were all standing on the beach in Dieppe. That was being read here in Richmond Hill. So thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution, and thanks so much for sharing that. I love Jack Russell's too. That's so wonderful. Debbie and Dawn are here, and you guys are unmuted. Yeah, you did it. Hi, how are you?
just fine. I'm trying to see myself on here, but I guess I don't see myself.
Yes, you do, in the
Where?
bottom. The bottom.
Oh, at the bottom right, there we are, yes. Well, Dieppe, I've been living with it for years.
Say who you are.
I'm Don Caddo. My dad was a colonel at Dieppe.
Blue Beach. Blue Beach.
Blue Beach. Debbie's helping me. Sorry.
It's so good.
I get over this. I've been living with it ever since I was 7 years old. Dad never talked about it. I asked him probably when I was 16. I said to Mom, I'm going to ask Dad about Dieppe. I was up at the cottage on the veranda. And I went over to him and I said, Dad, I want to talk about Dieppe. Would you talk to me? He got up out of his chair, put the paper down, and walked through the living room into the dining room. Sorry. I never talked to him again about it. I just knew from what Mom said, it was too painful for him. I can understand that. And even worse, I asked my Uncle Jim, who was the paymaster. He wasn't supposed to be on the raid, they said. Well, I don't know why he went, but he went because he probably wanted to go. I went to him on a Wednesday coming back from Hamilton. I said, Uncle Jim, I want to come and talk to you about Dieppe. And he said, you come on Friday. Friday, he died. Saturday morning, he died. I'm sorry. He was taken to the hospital. So I never got a firsthand comment from anybody that was really close to me. And so Dieppe is always, damn it, sorry. It's been always there for me.
Trying to imagine the feeling it must have been for all of them, but for the colonel watching or seeing or experiencing most of your men just being shot down and before your eyes. And he was one of the fortunate ones because of having his foresight. He was in the First World War as well. And he had taken along wire cutters with him. And it enabled he and 16 was it? 16 others?
16 others.
To
get up.
Once they got across the beach and into the
gully,
into the next to the wall, they were those steps that we've been seeing pictures of. They feel that that's maybe close to where they exited and were able to find this little pathway or push them. I guess maybe it wasn't so much of a path as we saw in 2017, but
they got up to the top, and by 4 o'clock, everything was quiet on the beach, and that's when they surrendered. I'm a little off message here now.
Well, I'd like to add, Dawn, I'd like to add that it was an incredible honor to stand on that beach in 2017 with you. And every time I find an interview of our Royals, and it's happened over and over and over, and including my father, they held your father in such high regard. And they all talked about how after the first wave went in, the Navy on the landing craft, one of the sailors had said to your dad, "It's gone bad, sir. You can't go in." And he said, "I have to go in. My boys are in there." And everywhere I look, they say the same thing, that he could have just, called it off right then and there, but he didn't. He went in to help his boys.
Yeah. I just have a little comment about General Roberts, who I don't have much faith in. He happened to be head of the army at that particular time in England, and father had a little set to with him. And this General Roberts said to my father, "If you're afraid to lead, send you home." Well, of course, I don't know why father didn't punch the bugger in the face, because he was just a useless general as far as I'm concerned. And he escaped to the islands of the north of Scotland to get away from everybody, I guess. I guess he got hounded. I don't really know, but I just know that's where he ended up, General Roberts did anyway. So, you look back at this was also, it was just new for everybody. It was completely different than the First World War. There was just so much ammunition, bombs, planes, but they had to do something because the Russians were calling for it. And that's how we ended up at Dieppe, is that...
it's a scapegoat.
Yeah, the scapegoat, as Debbie says. I think they served wonderfully. They did what they were trying to do, and as I said, Uncle Jim was going to give me more information, but as he was the paymaster, he wasn't supposed to be there. I don't know if I just said this a minute ago, but he got into the water and was picked up by the British. So he came home, and I never had a chance to really talk to him. And he's the only person that I really talk to about it. I went down to Sunnybrook, a year ago or 2 years ago. And I was here in Collingwood. I just got up one morning and I said, I gotta go down and see who's left. And I had made a phone call. There were some Dieppe veterans in the hospital. And I went down, they were all in their 90s. I don't know if they remembered my dad. They remember the colonel, but they don't remember maybe the name, but that's common for somebody that's 91 and 99, and one of them was. And I just felt good to be there. And talked to them. They didn't have much to say. It was just
The
good
closeness,
for me.
the closeness, I think the same kind of feeling that we all felt. And those of you that are listening that were on the 2017 wonderful Every Man Remembered trip.
Yeah.
That first night when everyone was sharing their stories similar to what's happening here is something that I think we'll never forget. And certainly as an outsider married into this, I recognized that what Don experienced without being able to ever have that meaningful conversation with his father, I would say 99% of the people say the same story, that it was just, whether it was just too painful or life had to go on because they were fortunate enough to come home. I mean, so many factors, but I think it helped to be able to know that you weren't the only one that didn't have that conversation. And so all the wonderful work that Jane has done and that trip provided for us to bring some of that together and make us feel like we did know more. And even though it might not be that personal bit, it was so meaningful.
I have a little museum out at the farm. It's on top of a bookcase.
Oh.
And I have a Toronto Star paper, which
Front
was
page.
the front page. And I think I brought that down to the armories for one of the exhibits. And I also have a stone or a rock that probably weighs 7 to 8 pounds. And that's what they were running through. It's just about that big and thick.
It's bigger than the ones we were seeing on your footage today, but
How they ever even got traction in those rocks, I don't know. Plus the bullets hitting the rocks and ricocheting. And I mean, the whole thing was must have been absolutely horrific.
Yeah. Thank you so much to both of you for coming and sharing. Oh my gosh, Don. I mean, it's so wonderful to know you. And hey, we partied in Italy afterwards, didn't we, you guys? We had fun. We had fun. But I think,
Can I say a couple of things? You know, the Vimy Memorial stands on a hillside. When Dad came back, he was with Allward and Garlock, and Mr. Allward, architectural firm, but Mr. Hugh Allward's uncle was Walter Allward, and he designed the Vimy Memorial.
Yes.
And Mr. Walter Allward had such an argument with Mackenzie King that when they unveiled that monument, Mackenzie King wouldn't let Allward come to attend the opening of that
ceremony. Yeah.
1934 or 36, whenever it was. I can't come up with that right now.
Isn't that terrible?
But that's just how bad some people are. But that man created our most famous monument there is. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And every Canadian should go and see that. Granted, it's the First World War, but basically it's just a marvelous exhibit of Canada, what Canada has done for others.
Absolutely. Ain't that the truth? Yeah. And I'll never forget, Don, you told me that when you met Allward, you were young. I think you were 6. Is that right? And you were saying that you remember his fingers being huge. For some reason, I've never forgotten that. And I don't know why, but I tell every group
Such a
that's
significant fact.
it's just an odd, but he was a huge man. And I've always had Walter Allward is what a wonderful human. We're so lucky here in Canada to have him. O'Keefe, I keep forgetting we have a historian on retainer. Can you give us a little bit of context about Don's father and for us?
Yeah. First of all, Don, I'm sitting here, after 25 years of research and kind of, not jaded, but just, sometimes the emotions tend to get tamped down. And then you speak. And here you are carrying the weight that your father carried. And I think unfairly carried, in my professional opinion. The task that was given to the Royal Regiment of Canada was gargantuan. They had to land on Blue Beach. They had to scurry up a tiny little staircase, if possible, in the middle of the night, if possible. Of course, as you know, military, no plan survives first contact. They arrived, daylight, the slaughter was on. Your father was lucky enough, and I've interviewed many veterans who said, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about your training, it comes down to fate or luck. And he was lucky enough with a handful to be able to scurry up and make it up to the top of the cliff before the rest of his boys were pinned down below. And then I think what really, I guess you could say, sticks in my craw is the fact that your father attempted to get to his objective, which were the German positions on the top of the eastern headland overlooking the entrance to Dieppe Harbor, which was crucial in the raid. The only problem is when he got up there, the handful of men were not enough to do any of the job necessary, and they easily would have been killed like their brothers on the beach. And at that particular point, that's when decision-making and the mask of command, I would argue, goes away, and no longer is this about slavishly following your orders to your objective. You have a greater duty, and that is to the lives of your men. And that's what your father exercised. In other words, at that moment, he said, no, this ain't on. And he made that decision to save those men so they could move to another day. Your dad did his duty. He did it the best he could with a flawed instrument, the plan, I mean, not his men. And he did the best he could and made the ultimate decision at the end to save their lives, and he did. And then, of course, sadly, he had to carry the weight of that for his entire life. And you can see the power of something like Dieppe on a day like this, when here we are 80 years later, and that still impacts you, his son, all these years later. That's war. That's Dieppe. Sadly, in some cases, that's history. But if I may, I'd like to toast not only all of those men, but in particular, the courage of your father on that moment to save those men.
That's so nice. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I raise a toast.
A little early for champagne, but we'll pretend with the coffee.
No one will judge you if there's real champagne. Not here, not today. That's a good idea, Jane. 5:30 in the morning on at Puy. We'll get the champagne going. That's a good idea. Thank you.
I won't forget to bring it this time. Luckily, somebody had a flask.
Oh yeah. Shh, don't tell if our insurance is watching.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thanks again. Thanks, David, for those words. That was really beautiful. And it's so true. I think today was a day, this live stream is so different from anything else we've been doing, because I just recognize this impact. you know, that Dieppe has had the 6 hours has impacted those 5,000 Canadians, and that reverberates onwards. And I think that is really the most important thing we can take away from today, because that was 6 hours. And 80 years later, it still has such an incredible impact on so many of us, you know? So we're coming to the end. There's a few other people that I want to reach out to, but is there anyone out there that hasn't said anything yet that really wants to?
Well, Sam, I've said a lot, but I would like to say something to David. When you first showed up at my house with all that documentation asking what I thought my father would think of it, and I had no idea at that point. All these years later, I've had all these years to think about it, and I agree with Doug Surfless. I think the men would have been able to rest easy because of what you've found, what you've done, and all the work you've done. So I thank you for that.
David, can I ask you a question? Why was there never a Dieppe medal? What do you think?
Well, there's this bar thing.
Well, eventually there was, but I think at the time, I mean, like a lot of things, it was eclipsed by other, if you will, more positive outcomes. And I think we just naturally, we tend to, you know, brush those things and move on, and hopefully we don't have to go back. But, you know, as you can see today, you can see, like I said, 80 years later, the pain is still there for whatever reason, you know, we still feel it. So, you know, I know the service medal came around, I think a bit later, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not actually, you know, completely schooled on the various awards and ceremonies, but I know that after the successes in Italy and the successes in Normandy, Dieppe temporarily was kind of pushed to the back burner, and it really, you know, it was the mourning later on, and then the controversy over the intent behind it, which kind of brought it back into the mainstream. And that was probably about 20 years after, around 1962, when the CBC started to investigate. So I wish I had a bit more of a hard, straightforward answer for you, but I think, you know, part of it goes down as a historian understanding human nature and how we look at narrative and things like that.
Thank you.
I have a few more people who want to say something. Michelle Rusk is here. Hi, Michelle. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi there.
Hi, Michelle. Another
Yep.
Sassy Tuner. Woohoo!
And I'm so sorry I am so late joining. I was up very late doing the war diaries. I wanted to mention for myself, when I was hearing about, I just caught the last part of Mr. Cato speaking, and my dad always had survivor guilt about Dieppe, not because he was there on the beach, but because he was part of the 16th Battery of the 3rd Light ACAC, who were at Dieppe, and so often nobody mentions the artillery being there, and there were many prisoners of war, as well as deaths, and some survivors who made it back. But my dad wasn't there. My dad had actually been injured with a parachute bomb while he was on dispatch duty in the south of England, and had spent just over 3 months in Park Purett Hospital in London, or just outside of London, plastic surgery, getting his jaw and legs re-put together, and arrived back to his unit exactly on the 19th of August. So saw those who were just coming back. He thought the whole war that
I need to print out a sheet from Maxine. Is it interesting?
after the end of the war, he thought that there was only 8 people left from the unit, from his battery. So I've lived with him having that regret. I lived with him always speaking with regret that somehow he wasn't there, and about the times when he would be at an event where perhaps we're in his 2nd Canadian Division, and somebody would ask him if he was at, they'd say, well, you don't have the Dieppe bar on your medals. So you can't possibly really be an old timer.
Oh.
And it somehow always bothered him.
No
But
kidding.
I'm so glad that David has brought the truth of what was behind the braid and the to the forefront again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're still on for coffee tomorrow, yeah?
We sure are.
Right on, right on. Ross had something else to say. And then I'm gonna actually also call on Ben and Brad to say a few words as well, if that's okay. Yeah? All right, cool. Ross, how are you?
I'm good. I just wanted to show one thing. I do hope that this will give an idea. This is the plaque that will go up at Charles Hill Park. This is the contents, and the picture that Barbara talked about, and I don't think you can probably see it very well, but this is the picture right here of Charles with his grandparents taken in England.
Can you lift it up a little bit?
How's that?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, now this is in total color when it goes up in the park. But this is what will go there, and very similar for the Thomas Miller Armstrong Park. And this is the picture of Blue Beach that Jane provided us to be part of this whole display.
Wonderful. Oh, thanks for sharing. Oh,
So I just wanted to share that.
Can I just ask, where is Richville?
Richville is just south of downtown Richmond Hill. It's just off of Yonge Street.
Oh, never heard of it.
Interestingly enough, it is part of Richmond Hill.
Okay.
One of the reasons there was actually four people from the area that were at Dieppe. Three of them were casualties. One was a POW, William Adams. They're not on the War Memorial in Richmond Hill because they lived outside of Richmond Hill. It was almost a full kilometer away. And of course, people on the outside of town didn't get included on the memorial. So that's what we want to address. And we're just going through the process right now of being able to expand our war memorial to get people from First World War, Second World War that were not part of the immediate community, and people from Afghanistan and people from peacekeeping duties who were casualties. They're not there, and they need to be. So that's where we're going with that. And it's going to be nice to be able to see Hill Charles on that monument at some point in time. So
Very good. Thank you.
So wonderful, Ross.
Sam, I have a quick question. Is there anything going on in Dieppe today? Like we saw?
There is most of it has been canceled. There has been, so the reenacting events that they usually have, if anyone was at Dieppe for an anniversary year, you will know that there's a huge market fair that's on with roller coaster rides, and so unfortunately all that has been canceled. There is pipers coming to play at the Memorial Museum for just the Jubilee Association staff. So it's going to be a very small ceremony. Daniel is filming it for me, and bless their hearts, they are figuring out how to send it to me with my email instructions as to how. So I'll share that. I'll share whatever footage they send to our Facebook and to our YouTube. And I'll also let everyone know that on Sunday, every Sunday, we send a newsletter, and this Sunday, our newsletter will have a PDF like all of our live streams do, but this package will include a ton of resources, a ton of other stuff that all of our friends in the community have produced today, all links to all the ceremonies and all the other stuff that everyone's doing, as well as books, resources, everything that kind of helped. Anything that Glenn and I have in our file folder is going to be thrown into that PDF because we can't share it with you in real life. So if you're not signed up to the newsletter, I wholeheartedly recommend it to stay in touch with our community, and that PDF will be there. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Brad. I just want to introduce Brad. There's a few of you in here. There's so many familiar faces, but I do want to bring attention to Brad's work because his YouTube channel On This Day in Canadian Military History is a wonderful YouTube channel, and he's been doing so much work. He specializes in the Battle of Hong Kong, but he has been doing so much work across the board. So Brad, what does Dieppe mean to you? Do you have any connection to the story at all? Am I throwing the spotlight on you without asking?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So connection, I don't really have a direct connection to Dieppe. We thought we did, my family, but it turns out we had the wrong name of the individual. So we ended up, so I was the one who figured it out. We thought we had lost a relative on the beaches, but no, he actually died in Normandy. So for years, obviously, we thought it was Dieppe, but it turned out to be Juno Beach. But I still have an intense interest in Dieppe. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for sharing these stories. I know how emotional and how difficult it can be to talk about a relative who's gone through these experiences. It's very difficult. I've been to Dieppe myself once. I was there in 2016. And just like David said, I think I put in the chat, the first time I went to the edge of the water and turned around, I think I said the same thing. It was so striking to see the headlands and just the built up, like the urban area and all of it in one overwhelming kind of view for me. Never been there before, so it was just so striking about that. So it's obviously something that I like to talk about and to continue telling these stories. I do it on Twitter, YouTube. I'm trying to do the digital history, so hearing about what the Juno Beach Center is doing is great. It's going to be awesome to see all these different things, and seeing dispatches from the communications has been great all day already. I'm going to share some of that later, but it's great to hear these things, and I'm doing my best to ensure that the next generations don't forget about what happened at Dieppe. And I work every day for Canadian military historians, for the veterans, for their memory. Dieppe, all the battles, Normandy, First World War, everything. I just tried to do my best to get these stories out so they won't be forgotten. And then hearing from, sorry, it gets me a little emotional hearing it from the children of veterans and them saying that they're worried that they're going to be forgotten. And I will never forget them, and I will never let them be forgotten as long as I can talk and type and anyone will listen to me. So that's something I just want to close with that. That's kind of my driving force in what I do. So thanks, Sam. Thanks for letting me talk a little bit. That's great.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad I did now. I'm so happy that I let you talk now. I did want to put a spotlight on that, you guys, because Brad's been doing so much work and churning out stuff all the time. And I think we all know how tough it is to be at your computer. I think we all know how tough it is to kind of go through this stuff. I mean, Jane as well, to read through these diaries, and oh goodness, the work that O'Keefe's done. I mean, so many of you have put so much passion and hard work into this just so that the memory is taken care of. It's so wonderful. I wanted to bring it over to Ben Main as well. Hi, Ben. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us where are you hailing from today, and what's your background? What's your connection to Dieppe?
Okay, hopefully you can hear me and I'm coming through, first of all. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so obviously I'm over in the UK, military historian and battlefield guide. And I just wanted to keep my part really short, to be honest, because I feel privileged to hear the stories from the families today and everything that's been contributed. I just wanted to say that from the British perspective, the Canadian sacrifice at Dieppe has never been forgotten. we continue to return to the beaches of Dieppe with British customers on tours that want to learn of what took place. They want to walk in the footsteps, not just of the British or possibly their family members, but also the Canadians, to see what took place on those beaches. And hopefully that's reassuring for yourselves the other side of the Atlantic, that it isn't a forgotten battle, especially by the British. We were there, we participated, and that's one of the reasons why the British do go, especially the family members walking in the commandos' footsteps. I've taken several families back to look at that aspect. Similar to David, Alex, Brad, when you walk on those beaches and you look at the terrain and landscape, you just think, yeah, and echo what's been said. Moving forward for the future, there is still that demand for British people to go and visit Dieppe. The tour that we do is being developed to try and stay there longer. People want to explore more of the ground, visit more of the town, the outskirts, and learn more. So as we move forward over the next few years, that's going to develop, hopefully, and we'll be there for longer, taking in the story of not just the British, but the sacrifice of the Canadians. And I'd say for as younger ones, again, Brad, Alex, Sam, David, it feels as though we've been given the baton, the torch of remembrance, and we're here to hear these stories from the family members, and we want to continue to pass that on to future generations. So I felt from my perspective it was important to come here today to listen, and thank you for all the stories that you have shared.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much. It's so true. You're a part of that. You're passing the torch on. I mean, Ben sent me an email the other day, and it's just, by the way, I haven't responded to you yet, but let me take this opportunity to tell you that I am blown away by your knowledge of Dieppe and your knowledge of the community that's there. Very much so. And I will say that, again, I can't stress enough that the community in Dieppe, the people in Dieppe, all the wonderful friends and family that we have there. Daniel always says that his mother held that letter before the raid began. The Canadians dropped letters over Dieppe to let them know that this is a raid. And it said in the letter, and if you go to the Memorial Museum, you'll see it on their website. They have a picture of this letter. It's so beautiful to see, where they're saying, this is a raid. We're not here for long, but we promise you one day we'll come back. And they did. The Canadians did come back. And Daniel said that his mother held that letter to her heart. And that, even though they had no connection to Canada, that was what their connection was. They kept that letter. And Daniel said he was so excited when he was little to meet his first Canadian, because he thought they all spoke French and didn't realize that Quebecois is a little bit different. So that was very, very, very funny to me. But that's where that connection comes from, is these tens of thousands of Dieppe citizens clutching onto this letter for 2 years with a promise of Canadians coming to liberate, and they did. Does anyone else want to say anything else before I'm gonna let Jane and David close us off? But is there anything else anyone else wants to say? Yeah, Doug, for sure, go for it.
Hear me now? Good?
Yep.
Okay. Just, I know I talk a lot. So anyway, first of all, I want to thank you, Sam, for today, your enthusiasm and getting this all together. Wonderful. First time I've met you. I know we'll see you again, but you know what? I want to thank you personally, and hopefully maybe everybody else, for your putting this together and getting David O'Keefe and Jane here. And thank you very much. My other thing is to Don Cato, my dad, as I said, Sergeant Charles Surfless. He was D Company. I'm sure your dad didn't know my dad, but I do know that my dad spoke not a lot, but he did hold your father in high regards. And I knew about your father from my father. So he was a leader. He was a full colonel heading in there. He took his guys in. He did everything he could, given the support or whatever. But he hang your head high and be proud of that, because my father did speak about your father with high regards. So that's it. And we'll be chatting. So cheers
Yay.
to all. Take care.
And cheers to all of you. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Sharon, hi. Great to see you, by the way. Hello. Sharon and I have been on tour together a million times. Hey. Her father was a radio operator of a Sherman tank in Normandy. So good connections there. Bud Weeks is his name. He also hails from Orillia, Ontario. So Sharon is in the same neck of the woods as Jane, and we've done a few reunion, I guess, get-togethers here in Canada, and Sharon has been so lovingly allowing us to use her house for that. So thank you for being here, Sharon. Oh, you want to say something? I've just asked you to unmute. There you go.
Sorry to be pushing in at the end. I'll be quick. I don't remember which year it was. We were at Dieppe, but after visiting the beach, we were all going back to our buses. Somebody spoke up and said that there was a gentleman on one of the other buses that was touring with us who had got off the bus at the beginning of the tour, walked down to the end of the pier, had come prepared wearing his swim trunks under his clothes, dropped his clothes and dove into the water to where his brother had died on the Dieppe Raid. Never forget that. Don't know his name, didn't get to talk to him because it was very emotional at the time. And just if that connection is really powerful. He went in and he swam where his brother died. So that was it. Thanks all. Great program. Keep it up.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
bye.
Bye-bye. Jane and David, did you want to close us out?
Sure, I'll let David go last. He can wrap it up. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today, for the support you give me. Sam, thank you for setting this up. What I do is for those men and the families. So I'm going to keep going till every man's remembered. There's a few that I've struggled for 6 years to find their photos, but I'm determined I'm going to find them. I don't know where, but I will, so that they're all represented. So I, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And thank you, David O'Keefe, for everything and for your support of my project. It means a lot.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Jane. Thank you, Sam, for putting this together. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's great to see so many, faces here and friends. And I feel a little out of place. I'm just the historian. And, people have been giving me compliments for, if you will, my research, but really it's just the evidence. It's just the evidence, and it's based on the things that happened and what men did, men did all those years ago. So really, I appreciate it, but I just kind of like to keep it in context in that sense. And the reason I say that is because on mornings like this, and I have this every year, whether it's Remembrance Day or D-Day or something like that, because my family goes back to the First World War with my grandfather and his brother, and my father and uncles in World War II, and another uncle in Korea, and my cousins in the Gulf, and my friends in Afghanistan. There's always a little bit of that feeling like we have today: reverence, mourning, emotions, sadness. But I'll leave you with this, that as the day goes, you get happier. You start to appreciate everything you have, all the little things. And as my grandfather used to say, one of the reasons he went there in World War I was so he could come back and live, laugh, and love. Wow. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. If these sacrifices meant anything, it was for us to be able to live our lives to the fullest. So yes, without a doubt, we might be parting on this kind of somber note, if you will, but maybe tonight, when the sun goes down, we will not only remember them, we'll live for them. So on.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. It was so great to see all of you. I can't wait to see you all in real life and give you all big hugs. Oh, big time. Have a great rest of your day. I will link right now the next live stream at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There's a link to it. It's Paul's show with Alex and David, and they'll be talking about the raid itself. It's the third part of a 3-part series that they're doing. So I recommend. I'll be there. Brad will be there. Woohoo! Thanks again, everyone, for coming. Subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't already, and you'll have that PDF on Sunday with these connections to all these wonderful people. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good one.